The door to my luxurious beach house swung open, revealing two faces I hadn't seen in 12 years. Eleanor, my daughter, and Gregory, her husband, stood before me with forced smiles and eyes filled with a poorly disguised desperation. Their gazes swept quickly over the interior of my new home. The Italian leather furniture, the 70-inch television, the panoramic ocean view that stretched behind me like a living painting of freedom. "Mom," Eleanor murmured, her voice trembling, "we need to talk to you." For 12 long years, these two human beings had erased me from their lives, as if I had never existed. 12 years without a phone call, without a Christmas invitation, without ever meeting my own grandchildren. And now, after I had bought this multi-million-dollar house in cash, they appeared on my doorstep like ghosts from the past, returning only when they caught the scent of money. I watched them in silence, noting every detail of their worn-out appearance. Gregory tried to peek over my shoulder to see more of the interior of my seaside sanctuary. Eleanor wore a faded green dress that had seen better days, and her synthetic leather shoes showed cracks that spoke of financial hardship. Worry lines marked her forehead like furrows in dry earth, and her hands trembled slightly as she awaited my response. "Talk," I repeated, with a calmness that surprised even myself. How interesting. After 12 years of absolute silence, now you want to talk. The color drained from their faces as if they had seen a ghost. Gregory cleared his throat uncomfortably, adjusting the wrinkled shirt he was wearing. It was obvious they had come straight from somewhere things hadn't gone as they'd hoped. Their eyes couldn't hide the desperation that had brought them to my door. During all those years of cruel abandonment, I had survived by selling my homemade pies and desserts at the town's farmers market. Every Sunday, while they were probably enjoying lavish family gatherings at expensive restaurants, I was standing under the relentless sun, smiling at strangers who appreciated my baking more than my own blood. My hands had grown rough from the constant work. My back had stooped from carrying heavy baskets filled with sweet hopes, but my pride never completely broke. The aroma of freshly baked desserts still lived in my most cherished memories. Finely ground cinnamon, pure vanilla extract, toasted coconut, ground to the perfect color. Flavors that once filled my home when Eleanor was little and called me the best cook in the whole wide world. Those golden days seemed to belong to another life, to another woman who naively believed that family love was unconditional and eternal. The transformation had begun gradually after Eleanor met Gregory at that company party where she worked as a secretary. At first, he was all charm and calculated courtesy. He would call me his dear mother-in-law, with that smile that never reached his eyes, and praise my Christmas casseroles while secretly planning how to distance Eleanor from my influence. But little by little, I began to notice the subtle changes that seeped into our relationship like a slow poison. When Eleanor mentioned visiting me on weekends, he always had a work emergency that required his immediate attention. When I called in the afternoons to hear her voice, he would answer the phone with an annoyed tone and promise that Eleanor would call me back, which never happened. Messages were mysteriously lost, invitations misplaced, and plans canceled at the last minute for increasingly far-fetched reasons. The exclusions began as accidental oversights that hurt, but which I could forgive. Eleanor's graduation from her MBA program. "Oh, Mom, we thought you already had other more important plans." The baby shower for her first daughter, my granddaughter, whom I never met. It was something very intimate, just her closest friends from college. That same granddaughter's first communion. "We completely forgot to tell you. Everything was so rushed, you know how these things are." Each excuse stabbed my heart like a dagger wrapped in gift paper with golden bows. I would smile, nod my head, and pretend to understand their reasons perfectly. "Don't worry, my love, next time will be different." But next time never came, and my phone remained as silent as a tomb in the cemetery where my husband rested. The nights grew longer, the Sundays emptier. I cooked for one, talked to the photographs on the walls, and celebrated my birthdays with a single lonely candle stuck in a small cake I bought from Mr. Peterson's bakery. He always asked about Eleanor, and I always responded with the same lie. She's very busy with her new life, you know how it is. But now, standing on the threshold of my dream house, with the ocean whispering secrets behind me and the salty scent of the sea filling my lungs, I saw them for who they really were. I invited them in with an elegant wave of my hand, watching as their eyes widened at the sight of the luxury that now surrounded me. The Italian marble floor gleamed under the natural light, pouring in through the enormous windows, reflecting their small, nervous figures. Eleanor walked behind Gregory like a shadow, keeping her head down while he appraised every piece of furniture, every work of art, every detail of my new reality with the poorly concealed greed of a professional appraiser. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the cream-colored leather sofa that had cost more money than they had seen together in years. "I suppose after so much time, you have a lot to tell me." Gregory cleared his throat, adopting that important man posture he always used when he wanted to impress someone. "Annabelle, we know it's been a few years since we've spoken." 12 years. I interrupted him with a firm voice, not a few years. 12 exact years since you decided I didn't exist. Eleanor finally looked up, and I could see tears welling in her eyes, but they no longer moved me as they once had. I had cried too many nights alone to allow her calculated tears to manipulate me now. "Mom, it wasn't our intention. Things got complicated. Gregory's job, the kids." "The kids I never met," I replied, feeling the rage that had been contained for years begin to boil inside me. My grandchildren, who grew up without knowing they had a grandmother who would have loved them unconditionally. During those 12 years of forced exile, I had built a routine that kept me sane. Every morning, I got up at 5 o'clock, preparing my desserts with the same dedication I once put into caring for Eleanor when she was a baby. The pie crust required patience. The exact point of the caramel needed constant attention, and the baking time did not forgive mistakes. Those recipes had become my salvation and my livelihood. Sundays at the farmer's market were my time for social interaction. Older women like me would come to buy my sweets, and we would end up talking about our lives, our absent children, our postponed dreams. Martha, a 72-year-old widow, became my confidant without either of us planning it. She too had been abandoned by her children after they married. She too knew the pain of being invisible to those who were once the center of your universe. "Children think that once they form their own family, we parents no longer matter," Martha would tell me as she bought 3 pies to take to her neighbors. "But when they need something, oh, then they remember we exist." How prophetic that conversation had been. Now, watching Eleanor wring her hands nervously while Gregory mentally calculating the value of my new life, I understood perfectly what Martha had meant. The change in Eleanor had been gradual, but relentless. During the first few years of her marriage, she still called me occasionally, but the conversations became mechanical, filled with awkward silences. Gregory was always present in the background, clearing his throat or making comments that cut our talks like sharp blades. "Your mom always has some drama," I heard him say once when Eleanor thought she had hung up the phone. "My mother never bothers us with her personal problems." Her personal problems? That's how Gregory had classified my loneliness. My natural desire to maintain contact with my only daughter. My need to be part of her new family. Everything I felt and needed had been reduced to personal problems that disturbed their perfect married life. The family invitations began to arrive less frequently until they disappeared completely. First, it was Thanksgiving dinner. "This year will be something small, Mom, just the 4 of us." Then Christmas. "The kids are sick, we'd better postpone it." Then the birthdays. everything got complicated with Gregory's work. Each excuse was accompanied by empty promises about a next time that never came. Eleanor developed a special talent for making every rejection sound reasonable, every exclusion seem temporary, every abandonment feel as if it were for my own good. We don't want you to feel obligated to come, Mom. You're old enough to rest and enjoy your peace and quiet. My peace and quiet, as if loneliness were a gift I had asked for, as if waking up every morning in a silent apartment was my idea of happiness, as if cooking for one and eating in front of the television was my definition of a full life. The years passed like pages of a calendar that no one read. My routine became so predictable that even the mailman knew exactly what time I would be watering the plants on my small balcony. Monday, prepare apple pies. Tuesday, Jell-O salads of different flavors. Wednesday, chocolate fudge cakes that sold like hotcakes. Thursday, muffins that perfumed my entire apartment. Friday, pumpkin spice turnovers. Saturday, prepare everything for market day. Sunday, the market, the ladies, the conversations that temporarily filled the void in my chest. But there were also moments of such profound loneliness that I thought I would drown in it. Entire nights awake, staring at the phone that never rang, waiting for a text that never arrived. Christmases celebrated with television specials and a small artificial tree that I decorated by myself. New Year's Eve welcomed with a glass of lukewarm sparkling wine and the renewed hope that maybe this would be the year of the reunion. The sharpest pain came at unexpected moments. When I saw whole families at the park, when I heard other grandmothers talk about their grandchildren, when I passed by toy stores and wondered what mine would like. Eleanor had had 3 children, whom I knew only from blurry photos on social media that I checked from fake accounts like a spy on my own family. Mom, Eleanor's voice brought me back to the present. We know we made mistakes. Mistakes? The word came out of my mouth like a bullet. Erasing your mother from your life for 12 years was a mistake? Denying your children the love of their grandmother was a mistake? Gregory shifted uncomfortably in his seat, finally understanding that this conversation was not going to unfold as he had planned. His eyes continued to scan my living room, calculating, evaluating, planning his next move, like the expert manipulator he had always been. They weren't mistakes, I continued, feeling the truth pour from my throat like hot lava after years of being contained. They were conscious, calculated, cruel decisions. You chose to erase me from your lives, as if I were an old piece of furniture that was no longer useful to you. Eleanor began to sob, but her tears no longer had the power to disarm me as they once had. I had cried alone for too many nights, wondering what I had done wrong, how I had failed as a mother, why my unconditional love had not been enough to keep my family together. Mom, please let us explain, Eleanor tried between sobs. Explain what? My voice rose without my being able to control it. Are you going to explain to me why I didn't know my granddaughter when she took her first steps? Why I wasn't there when my grandson lost his first tooth? Why I spent 12 Christmases cooking for no one while you built family memories without me? Gregory finally spoke, using that condescending tone he had perfected over the years. Annabelle, we understand that you feel hurt, but families sometimes need space to grow. It was nothing personal against you. The laugh that escaped my throat sounded so bitter that even I was surprised. Nothing personal, Gregory? You turned my daughter into a stranger. You planted poison in her heart against me. You decided that I had no place in the life you were building. I remembered with painful clarity the day Eleanor communicated her final decision to me. It was a rainy Tuesday in October, exactly 12 years ago. She arrived at my apartment with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Cold, distant, as if she were fulfilling an unpleasant obligation. Mom, Gregory and I have been talking, she began, without even accepting the coffee I had prepared for her as always. We think it's better if you have less contact with us for a while. Less contact? I asked, feeling the world sway beneath my feet. What does that mean? It means you are no longer welcome in our house. It means we no longer want you to call constantly. It means we need space to be a family without external interference. External interference. That's what my own daughter had called me. As if I were a meddling neighbor, a stranger who interfered in matters that did not concern her. Not her mother, who had carried her for 9 months in her womb, who had spent sleepless nights when she had a fever, who had worked double shifts to pay for her college. Eleanor, I don't understand what I've done wrong, how I've failed you. My voice broke, but she remained impassive. It's not about what you've done wrong, Mom. It's about what's best for my marriage and my children. Gregory needs to know that I put our nuclear family first before anyone else. Anyone else? That's what I was to my daughter? Anyone else? But Eleanor, I'm your mother. I'm your children's grandmother. I'm not a stranger who threatens your marriage. Gregory says that mothers-in-law always cause problems in young marriages. He says it's better to establish clear boundaries from the beginning. Gregory says? Gregory thinks, Gregory needs. At some point, my daughter's voice had become an echo of his. Her thoughts had been replaced by his. Her heart had been reprogrammed to beat to the rhythm he set. And what about what you say, Eleanor? What about what you think? What about your heart? She remained silent for long minutes, and for a moment, I thought the daughter I had raised with so much love would return to me. But when she spoke, her voice sounded hollow, rehearsed, as if she were reciting lines from a play. I think Gregory is right. I think it's for the best for everyone, including you, Mom. You can have your own life without worrying about us. That was the last real conversation we had. After that day, Eleanor became a ghost who occasionally sent me cold, superficial text messages. Hope you're well, Mom. Happy birthday. Happy New Year. Automatic messages, without soul, without love, like the ones a company sends to its customers. The first few months after that breakup were the darkest of my life. I lost weight, I lost sleep, I lost hope. Every morning I woke up hoping it was a nightmare, that Eleanor would call to apologize, that everything would go back to the way it was. But the phone remained silent, and reality grew heavier each day. It was Martha who saved me from sinking completely into depression. She appeared at my door one Sunday morning when I had been in bed for 3 days, without showering, without eating more than saltine crackers and iced tea. Annabelle, get up. You have 2 choices. You can stay here, dying in life for a daughter who doesn't deserve you, or you can build a new life that is worthy of you. Her words sounded harsh, but they had the force of truth. That afternoon, she helped me clean my apartment, organize my recipes, and plan my new dessert business. If you're going to suffer, she told me as we beat the first batch of pie filling in months, do it while you're doing something productive. And so my new life began, slowly, painfully, but with determination. Every pie I sold was a step toward emotional independence. Every satisfied customer was a small personal victory. Every dollar I earned was proof that I had value, even if my own daughter didn't see it. Sundays at the market became my weekly therapy. The ladies who bought my desserts became my new chosen family. We shared stories of ungrateful children, of marriages that divided families, of the loneliness of being a mother in a society that discards you when you are no longer useful. My son tells me I'm too dramatic when I complain that he doesn't visit, a lady named Joanna told me, while trying my mango jello. But it's not drama, it's real pain. It's the basic human need to feel loved and valued by those you brought into the world. Now, sitting in my living room, which cost more than everything Eleanor and Gregory owned together, I remembered every tear, every sleepless night, every lonely birthday, and I saw them there, small and desperate, looking for something from me after having turned their backs on me for more than a decade. So, after 12 years of silence, I said with a controlled voice, "What exactly brings you to my door?" Gregory and Eleanor exchanged a meaningful look. Finally, he cleared his throat again. "Annabelle, the truth is, we're going through a very difficult time." "A very difficult time?"
I repeated his words slowly, savoring the irony as if it were bitter honey.
What an extraordinary coincidence that you come looking for me just when you have problems, after 12 years of considering my existence irrelevant to your perfect lives. Gregory shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, clearly preparing the speech he had rehearsed during the drive to my house. His eyes avoided mine as he formulated the words he thought would soften my heart. The construction company went bankrupt 6 months ago, he finally confessed. We lost all our savings. The house is in foreclosure. Eleanor had to quit her job to take care of the kids because we can't afford daycare. We're living with my parents, but they have financial problems too. Eleanor nodded desperately, as if confirming their misfortune would automatically generate my compassion. Mom, the kids ask why they don't have their own room, why Dad is always angry, why Mom cries at night. We don't know what to do. Ah, I said, leaning back in my Italian leather armchair. So now I'm useful? Now I exist? Now I'm part of the family. How convenient. During those 12 years of ostracism, I had developed a special ability to read between the lines, to detect emotional manipulation, to protect myself from people who only approached when they needed something. The ladies at the market had taught me that children often return to their parents when life hits them, not out of genuine love, but out of pure convenience. It's not like that, Mom, Eleanor protested, her voice breaking. I've always loved you. I've always thought of you. It was just the circumstances. The circumstances? I interrupted her with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Let's talk about circumstances, Eleanor. When your first son had pneumonia 8 years ago and was hospitalized for a week, where was I? When your second son broke his arm playing soccer 5 years ago, did you call me? When your youngest daughter had problems at school last year, did you think to ask her grandmother for advice? Each question was an arrow aimed at the center of her guilt. Eleanor paled with each one because she knew the answer was the same. She hadn't thought of me at any difficult moment in their lives. Only now, when they needed money, when their world was crumbling financially, had they remembered they had a mother. We knew you had financial problems, Gregory muttered, trying to justify the unjustifiable. We didn't want to be a burden to you when you could barely support yourself selling desserts. The audacity of his comment left me speechless for a moment. Not only had they justified my exclusion because of my poverty, but now they had the nerve to admit it openly, as if it were a valid reason to abandon a loved one. I see, I said, with a calmness that surprised me. So I wasn't good enough for you when I was poor, but now that you know about my new financial situation, I'm suddenly valuable enough to receive a visit. The truth about my economic transformation was something they couldn't imagine. 3 months ago, while preparing pies for the Sunday sale, I received a call that changed my destiny forever. It was a lawyer from the city informing me of the death of my Aunt Joan, my late father's sister, who had lived in the United States for 50 years without our family knowing much about her. Aunt Joan had been the black sheep of the family, the one who left young in search of the American dream and never returned. For decades, we only received occasional Christmas postcards, but we never really knew how she had fared in life. It turned out she had done extraordinarily well. The inheritance included a house in Los Angeles that sold for $1.5 million, bank accounts with another $500,000, and several investments totaling another $2 million. Overnight, I went from counting pennies to buy ingredients for my desserts to having more money than I had ever dreamed of possessing. But the most important thing about that inheritance wasn't the money. It was the letter Aunt Joan had left specifically for me. In that letter, she told me how she had followed my life through social media, how she had seen my loneliness, my family's abandonment, my daily struggle to survive. She explained that she had decided to leave me everything because she recognized in me the same strong woman she had been, someone who had been underestimated and abandoned by her family, but who had never given up. Annabelle, the letter said, in the shaky handwriting of a 92-year-old woman, I have seen how your daughter has treated you.
I have seen your dignity and loneliness. This money is for you to live your final years as the queen you always were, not as the beggar they wanted you to be. With that inheritance, I bought this house by the sea, a place where I could wake up every morning listening to the waves and breathing fresh air, free from painful memories and toxic people. For the first time in 12 years, I slept in complete peace. Mom, Eleanor tried to approach me, but I raised my hand to stop her. I know we made terrible mistakes. I know we hurt you in unforgivable ways, but we're family, blood. Blood? I interrupted with a bitter laugh. Eleanor, blood means nothing without respect, without love, without consideration. You turned our family connection into a wet piece of paper that you threw in the trash when it no longer suited you. Gregory leaned forward, adopting a posture of calculated vulnerability that he had probably practiced in front of the mirror. Annabelle, we understand your pain. We understand your anger, but the children are innocent in all of this. They don't deserve to suffer for our mistakes. There it was, the card he had saved for last. The children, my unknown grandchildren, the most powerful emotional manipulation they had in their arsenal. They knew that mentioning the little ones could soften my heart, hardened by years of neglect. The children? I asked, feeling a mixture of pain and rage stir in my chest.
The same children who grew up without knowing they had a grandmother who would have loved them unconditionally? The same children who were denied the love, wisdom, and care of their grandmother for all these years? Eleanor began to sob again, but this time her tears seemed genuine, heavy with the weight of real guilt. Mom, we didn't think about the long-term consequences. Gregory said it was better for the marriage, that mothers-in-law always caused problems. Gregory said? I repeated, looking directly at the man who had orchestrated the destruction of my relationship with my daughter. Gregory thought. Gregory decided. And where was your own voice, Eleanor? Where was your own heart? My voice got lost somewhere between the promises of a perfect marriage and the fear of contradicting my husband, Eleanor admitted, with an honesty that momentarily disarmed me. But Mom, now I realize everything we lost. The kids ask why they don't have a grandmother because their friends talk about their grandmothers, and they don't know any. Her words were daggers straight to the heart. But I had learned not to let pain cloud my judgment. For 12 years, I had fantasized about this moment. Eleanor's return, the acknowledgement of her mistake, the chance to meet my grandchildren. But now that it was happening, I realized it was coming too late, and for the wrong reasons. Do you know how many of my grandchildren's birthdays I missed while you were building your perfect family without external interference? I asked, my voice hardening with each word. Do you know how many nights I stayed awake, imagining what their voices, their laughs, their personalities would be like? Do you know how many toys I bought and stored in a box, waiting for a day that never came? Gregory shifted nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. His plan of emotional softening wasn't working as he had hoped, and I could see him mentally calculating his next manipulative move. Annabelle, we understand you're hurt, he intervened, with that condescending voice he had perfected over the years. But now we can change all that. The children can meet you, they can spend time with you, we can be a family again. A family? I repeated, savoring the irony of his words. You mean the kind of family where the grandmother is welcome only when she has money to solve the problems of irresponsible adults? The house filled with a tense silence. Through the large windows, I could see the ocean waves breaking against the rocks, a constant reminder of my new freedom and my hard-won independence. This place represented everything I had achieved without them, everything I had built from the ashes of my abandonment. During these 3 months living by the sea, I had developed a completely new routine. I woke up each morning to the sound of seagulls, not to the silent cry of loneliness. I prepared my coffee in a kitchen equipped with the best appliances, not in the small space where I used to count every penny for basic ingredients. I walked along the beach at sunset,
feeling the sand between my toes and the salty wind in my hair, free from the emotional heaviness I had carried for years. I had also started helping other older women who, like me, had been abandoned by their families. Martha had moved into an apartment near my house, and together we had created a small support group for ladies in similar situations. On Wednesday afternoons, we would gather in my living room to share stories, emotional survival strategies, and of course, my homemade desserts. Freedom, Martha had told me during one of those meetings, is realizing that you don't need the approval of those who hurt you to be happy. Her words had resonated in my heart like a bell of truth. For the first time in decades, I was living for myself, not waiting for calls that never came, not cooking for children who didn't visit, not dreaming of family reunions that existed only in my imagination. Mom, Eleanor approached the edge of my armchair, her eyes red from crying. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I swear on my children that if you help us now, things will be different. I will be different. Different how? I asked, keeping my voice cold and controlled. Different until you solve your financial problems and don't need me anymore? Different until Gregory decides again that I'm an interference in his perfect marriage? Gregory shifting abruptly, finally showing his true nature when he realized his manipulation strategy wasn't working. Look, Annabelle, I understand you have resentments, but the reality is that we all make mistakes in families. The important thing is to move on, not to get stuck in the past. His comment was like a slap in the face. After 12 years of deliberate abandonment, he had the audacity to minimize my pain as getting stuck in the past, as if my suffering were a whimsical choice rather than a direct consequence of their cruel actions. Move on? I stood up from my armchair, feeling all my dignity rise like a steel tower. Gregory, I have already moved on. I built a new life without you. I found peace without your presence. I discovered my worth without your validation. Eleanor covered her face with her hands, sobbing, with a desperation that would have broken my heart years ago. But the heart they had known had died slowly over 12 years of indifference, and had been reborn as something stronger, wiser, more selective with its love. You don't understand, do you? I continued, walking toward the window overlooking the ocean. You came here expecting to find the same broken woman you abandoned 12 years ago. You expected to find someone so desperate for family love that she would be willing to pay any price for a few crumbs of affection. The truth was that during the first few years after their abandonment, I would indeed have been willing to pay any price.
I would have mortgaged my soul for a phone call from Eleanor. I would have sold everything I owned for an afternoon with my grandchildren. I would have begged for forgiveness for offenses I never committed, just to be part of their lives again. But time and pain had taught me valuable lessons about self-love and personal dignity. The afternoons with Martha and the other ladies had shown me that family abandonment was more common than I thought, and that surviving it was not only possible, but could be the beginning of a more authentic and satisfying life. For years, I blamed myself, I confessed, still looking out at the ocean. I thought I had failed as a mother, that I had been too meddlesome, too present, too loving. I tortured myself looking for the exact moment I lost my daughter. I turned to face them directly, and I could see how my words were affecting them in different ways. Eleanor seemed genuinely devastated, as if she were finally understanding the magnitude of the damage they had caused. Gregory, on the other hand, showed signs of impatience and frustration, clearly calculating whether it was worth continuing with this strategy or if he should try a different approach. But eventually, I understood the truth, I continued. I didn't lose my daughter because of something I did wrong. I lost her because she chose a man who considered having a present mother-in-law a threat to his fragile masculinity. I lost her because she valued her husband's approval more than her mother's love. Eleanor stood up, swaying as if my words were physical blows. Mom, it's not like that. I never stopped loving you. I just got confused. Gregory made me believe it was for the best for everyone. Gregory manipulated you, I corrected her, but you allowed him to do it. You chose to believe his lies because they were more comfortable than defending your mother. You preferred the artificial peace of a controlling marriage over the discomfort of setting healthy boundaries with your husband. The silence that followed my words was deafening. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the distant sound of the waves, Eleanor's agitated breathing. Gregory had adopted that rigid posture he used when he felt cornered, preparing to counterattack or to retreat strategically. "So, what do you want from us?" Gregory finally asked, abandoning any pretense of remorse or vulnerability. "Do you want us to grovel? Do you want us to humiliate us as revenge for the past?" His question revealed exactly what I had expected. For him, it wasn't about repairing emotional damage or rebuilding family relationships. It was a transaction, a negotiation, where he expected to pay the minimum price necessary to obtain the maximum financial benefit. "I don't want your humiliation, Gregory," I replied, with a serenity that surprised me. "What I want is something you probably can't give: genuine respect, unconditional love, and the acknowledgement that you spent 12 years treating me like I was garbage." Eleanor rose from the sofa with trembling movements, approaching me with her hands extended, as if she wanted to touch me but didn't dare. "Mom, I can give you that. I do recognize all the harm we did to you. I've spent these last few months awake at night, remembering every cruel moment, every call I didn't return, every invitation I never sent." "These last few months?" I interrupted, noticing the specificity of her confession. "What happened exactly 3 months ago that made you remember you had an abandoned mother?" The color drained from her face, as if she had been caught in a lie. Gregory shot her a warming look, but it was too late. I had detected the inconsistency in her story of spontaneous repentance. We, Eleanor stammered, desperately searching for the right words. "You found out about my inheritance," I completed the sentence for her, feeling all the pieces of the puzzle fall perfectly into place. "Someone told you about my new house, about my new financial situation. That's why you're here. Not for love, not for genuine remorse, but because you discovered that the mother you abandoned now has money." Gregory tried to take control of the situation again, but his mask of vulnerability had cracked completely. "Annabelle, that's not true. Of course we heard about your good fortune, and we're glad to know you're well, but we came—" "Why did you come?" "Because you're broke," I interrupted, with a coldness that cut like a blade. "You came because you desperately need money, and I am your last resort. You came because you calculated that 12 years of abandonment could be forgiven with a few well-acted tears and empty promises of reconciliation." The truth about how they had found out about my new situation had come to me the week before through Martha. Her niece worked at the bank where my inheritance transfer had been handled and had overheard conversations about the lady who sold pies and now has millions of dollars. Gossip travels fast in small towns, especially when it involves such dramatic economic transformations. "It was Mr. Peterson from the bakery," Martha had explained during one of our coffee afternoons. "He says Eleanor and Gregory have been asking around about you, wanting to know if it's true you got rich overnight." That information had been like a vaccine against any romantic hope I might have harbored for a genuine reunion. When I saw them appear at my door, I already knew exactly why they were there and what they wanted from me. "Mom, yes, we found out about your inheritance," Eleanor finally admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But that doesn't mean we're here just for the money. We're here because we realized we made the biggest mistake of our lives." "You realize now?" I asked, walking to the kitchen and pouring myself a glass of cool water. "You didn't realize during the 12 years I spent crying over your absence? You didn't realize when I spent 3 consecutive Christmases in the hospital with pneumonia because loneliness had weakened my immune system? You didn't realize when I had to sell my wedding jewelry to pay for medication?" Each revelation was a bomb that exploded in the tense silence of my living room. Eleanor knew nothing about my illnesses, my financial crises, the nights I had considered it would be easier to simply not wake up the next day. To her, I had existed in a time bubble, frozen at the moment of her departure, patiently awaiting her eventual return. "We didn't know," Eleanor murmured, but her excuse sounded hollow even to herself. "You didn't know because you never asked," I corrected her. "For 12 years, you could have picked up the phone just once to find out how your mother was. You could have sent a text message asking if I needed anything. You could have stopped by my apartment to check if I was still alive." Gregory stood up abruptly, clearly frustrated that his plan of emotional manipulation was not yielding the expected results. "All right, Annabelle, we get it. You're angry. But we're here now. We're here asking for forgiveness, wanting to fix things. Doesn't that count for something?" His question revealed the depth of his misunderstanding of the damage they had caused. For him, forgiveness was something that could be obtained by simply showing up and apologizing. As if 12 years of emotional abandonment could be erased with one uncomfortable conversation. What counts, Gregory, is the moment you decided to come. You didn't come when I needed you. You came when you need me. I walked over to the window overlooking the backyard, where I had planted red roses that were blooming beautifully under the coastal sun. Those roses represented my rebirth, my ability to create beauty even after being cruelly pruned by those who were supposed to care for me. For all these years, I continued, without turning to look at them, I developed a very simple philosophy about human relationships. People show you who they really are through their actions, not their words. You showed me that I had no value in your lives when things were going well. Eleanor came up behind me, and I could feel her trembling presence near my shoulder. "Mom, we were young, stupid, influenced by wrong ideas about marriage and family, but we've grown up, we've matured." "You've gone broke," I corrected her without turning around. "You haven't matured, you've gone broke. And now that you need financial help, you suddenly remember you have a mother." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of my phone. It was Martha, probably calling for our weekly gardening session. I let it go to voicemail, but her call reminded me of something important. I had a full and satisfying life without them. I had genuine friendships, purpose, peace of mind. I didn't need validation from people who had treated me like a disposable object. "Do you know what the most painful moment of all these years was?" I asked, finally turning to face them. "It wasn't when you stopped inviting me to celebrations. It wasn't when you stopped calling. It was when I realized that I loved you unconditionally, but your love for me had conditions that you never clearly explained." Eleanor began to sob again, but this time her tears seemed to come from a deeper, more genuine place. "Mom, I love you. I've always loved you. It's just that I let others convince me that that love was problematic for my marriage." "And now that your marriage is in a financial crisis," I observed, "suddenly that love is no longer problematic? How convenient." Gregory had remained silent for the last few minutes, but I could see his mind working, calculating, evaluating, looking for a new angle of attack. He finally spoke, adopting a different tone, more direct and less manipulative. "Look, Annabelle, let's be honest here. We need financial help. You have money, we're family. Even if we've had problems in the past, isn't it natural for family to help each other in difficult times?" His brutal honesty was almost refreshing after so much poorly acted emotional manipulation. At least now we were speaking clearly about what they really wanted from me. "I don't want your humiliation, Gregory," I replied after a long sip of coffee. "What I want is something you probably can't give: genuine respect, unconditional love, and the acknowledgement that you spent 12 years treating me like I was garbage." Eleanor rose from the sofa with trembling movements, approaching me with her hands extended, as if she wanted to touch me but didn't dare. "Mom, I can give you that. I do recognize all the harm we did to you. I've spent these last few months awake at night, remembering every cruel moment, every call I didn't return, every invitation I never sent." "These last few months?" I interrupted, noticing the specificity of her confession. "What happened exactly 3 months ago that made you remember you had an abandoned mother?" The color drained from her face, as if she had been caught in a lie.
Gregory shot her a warning look, but it was too late. I had detected the inconsistency in her story of spontaneous repentance. We, Eleanor stammered, desperately searching for the right words. You found out about my inheritance, I completed the sentence for her, feeling all the pieces of the puzzle fall perfectly into place. Someone told you about my new house, about my new financial situation. That's why you're here. Not for love, not for genuine remorse, but because you discovered that the mother you abandoned now has money. Gregory tried to take control of the situation again, but his mask of vulnerability had cracked completely. Annabelle, that's not true. Of course we heard about your good fortune, and we're glad to know you're well. But we came. Why did you come? Because you're broke.
I interrupted, with a coldness that cut like a blade. You came because you desperately need money, and I am your last resort. You came because you calculated that 12 years of abandonment could be forgiven with a few well-acted tears and empty promises of reconciliation. The truth about how they had found out about my new situation had come to me the week before through Martha. Her niece worked at the bank where my inheritance transfer had been handled and had overheard conversations about the lady who sold pies and now had millions of dollars. Gossip travels fast in small towns, especially when it involves such dramatic economic transformations. It was Mr. Peterson from the bakery who told half the town, Martha had explained during one of our coffee afternoons. He says Eleanor and Gregory have been asking around about you, wanting to know if it's true you got rich overnight. That information had been like a vaccine against any romantic hope I might have harbored for a genuine reunion. When I saw them appear at my door, I already knew exactly why they were there and what they wanted from me. Mom, yes, we found out about your inheritance, Eleanor finally admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. But that doesn't mean we're here just for the money. We're here because we realized we made the biggest mistake of our lives. You realize now, I repeated, walking to the kitchen and pouring myself a glass of cool water. You didn't realize during the 12 years I spent crying over your absence. You didn't realize when I spent 3 consecutive Christmases in the hospital with pneumonia because loneliness had weakened my immune system. You didn't realize when I had to sell my wedding jewelry to pay for medication. Each revelation was a bomb that exploded in the tense silence of my living room. Eleanor knew nothing about my illnesses, my financial crises, the nights I had considered it would be easier to simply not wake up the next day. To her, I had existed in a time bubble, frozen at the moment of her departure, patiently awaiting her eventual return. We didn't know, Eleanor murmured, but her excuse sounded hollow even to herself. You didn't know because you never asked, I corrected her. For 12 years, you could have picked up the phone just once to find out how your mother was. You could have sent a text message asking if I needed anything. You could have stopped by my apartment to check if I was still alive. Gregory stood up abruptly, clearly frustrated that his plan of emotional manipulation was not yielding the expected results. All right, Annabelle, we get it. You're angry. But we're here now. We're here asking for forgiveness, wanting to fix things. Doesn't that count for something? His question revealed the depth of his misunderstanding of the damage they had caused. For him, forgiveness was something that could be obtained by simply showing up and apologizing, as if 12 years of emotional abandonment could be erased with one uncomfortable conversation. What counts, Gregory, is the moment you decided to come. You didn't come when I needed you. You came when you need me. I walked over to the window overlooking the backyard, where I had planted red roses that were blooming beautifully under the coastal sun. Those roses represented my rebirth, my ability to create beauty even after being cruelly pruned by those who were supposed to care for me. For all these years, I continued, without turning to look at them, I developed a very simple philosophy about human relationships. People show you who they really are through their actions, not their words. You showed me that I had no value in your lives when things were going well. Eleanor came up behind me, and I could feel her trembling presence near my shoulder.
Mom, we were young, stupid, influenced by wrong ideas about marriage and family, but we've grown up, we've matured. You've gone broke, I corrected her without turning around. You haven't matured, you've gone broke. And now that you need financial help, you suddenly remember you have a mother. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of my phone. It was Martha, probably calling for our weekly gardening session. I let it go to voicemail, but her call reminded me of something. I had a full and satisfying life without them. I had genuine friendships, purpose, peace of mind. I didn't need validation from people who had treated me like a disposable object. Do you know what the most painful moment of all these years was? I asked, finally turning to face them. It wasn't when you stopped inviting me to celebrations. It wasn't when you stopped calling. It was when I realized that I loved you unconditionally, but your love for me had conditions that you never clearly explained. Eleanor began to sob again, but this time her tears seemed to come from a deeper, more genuine place. Mom, I love you. I've always loved you. It's just that I let others convince me that that love was problematic for my marriage. And now that your marriage is in a financial crisis, I observed, suddenly that love is no longer problematic? How convenient. Gregory had remained silent for the last few minutes, but I could see his mind working, calculating, evaluating, looking for a new angle of attack. He finally spoke, adopting a different tone, more direct and less manipulative. Annabelle, you're going to regret this decision. We're going to tell the whole town how you abandoned your own family in their time of need. We're going to make sure everyone knows what kind of mother you really are. His threat was so predictable, it almost made me laugh. It was the last, desperate card of a manipulator who had lost all his power, the threat of destroying my social reputation. Gregory, I replied with a calm that visibly disarmed him. The town already knows exactly what kind of mother I am.
They know that for 12 years, I worked to the point of exhaustion, selling desserts to survive. They know I never spoke ill of you, despite your abandonment. They know I maintained my dignity, even in poverty. I opened the door wide, feeling the sea breeze fill my home with fresh, purifying air. What they are going to discover now is what kind of children and son-in-law you are. They are going to discover how you treated a loving mother for 12 years and how you only showed up at her door when you needed money. Eleanor stopped at the threshold, turning to look at me one last time. In her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Respect. Respect mixed with pain, with regret, with a belated understanding of what she had lost. Mom, she murmured, I hope one day you can forgive us. I hope one day we can find a way to heal all this damage. Eleanor, I replied, with a sadness that spanned decades of pain. Forgiveness is not about forgetting the past. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment. I have already freed myself. What you need is not my forgiveness. It's to learn to live with the consequences of your decisions. Gregory left first, clearly furious and defeated. Eleanor followed him slowly, turning back several times as if she wanted to say something more, but the words never came. I watched them walk to their old, battered car, their small, insignificant figures against the backdrop of the infinite ocean. After 12 years, they had finally left my life in the same way they had entered it, seeking something for themselves without offering anything genuine in return. I closed the door gently and returned to my living room, where the silence felt like a blessing. There were no shouts, no manipulation, no emotional drama, just peace. I poured myself a glass of white wine that I had been saving for a special occasion and went out to my terrace. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that reflected on the calm waves. My phone rang. It was Martha. How did it go with the unexpected visitors? She asked with the wisdom of someone who had been through similar experiences. Exactly as we expected, I replied, taking a sip of wine and feeling peace settle into my bones. They came for money, not for love.
they confirmed everything we already knew about them. And how do you feel? I reflected on her question as I watched a seagull glide gracefully over the waves. I feel free, Martha. I feel completely, absolutely free. That night, after the call with Martha, I walked along the beach under the stars. The cool sand between my toes, the rhythmic sound of the waves, the vastness of the ocean stretching to the horizon. Everything reminded me that I had chosen a life of peace over a life of toxic family complications. In the following days, the news of Eleanor and Gregory's visit spread through the town as I had predicted, but the reactions were the exact opposite of what Gregory had expected. The ladies at the market expressed their support, many sharing similar stories of children who only appeared when they needed money. "You did the right thing, Annabelle," Mr. Peterson from the bakery told me when I went to buy bread a week later. "A mother who respects herself teaches her children to respect her too." 2 months later, I received a text message from Eleanor. It was simple, without manipulation, without requests. "Mom, I'm in therapy. I'm learning about toxic relationships and healthy boundaries. I hope that one day, when I'm truly ready to be the daughter you deserve, you might consider getting to know me again. I love you." I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I saved the message and continued with my new life. My mornings of gardening, my afternoons helping other older women, my evenings in contemplative solitude. Maybe one day, Eleanor would truly find her independent voice. Maybe one day, she would learn to set healthy boundaries with Gregory. Maybe one day, we could build a relationship based on mutual respect instead of desperate need. But until that day, if it ever came, I would continue to live my full and dignified life, surrounded by the infinite ocean, which reminded me daily that some currents are too strong to be changed, and that wisdom lies in learning to navigate calmer waters. The money had given me many things, but the most valuable was not the house or the luxuries. It was the ability to choose who deserved my time, my energy, and my love. And I had chosen wisely. If you enjoyed my story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can write more stories like this. Thanks a lot in advance. What about you? What would you do in this person's shoes? I'd really love to hear your thoughts, so drop them in the comments. I'm always curious to know what you think. Oh, and let me know where you've heard this story. If you want to hear more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to my channel. There are many more waiting for you. Big hugs and see you next time.